Hey folks, welcome to today's edition of Notre Dame Daily, brought to you, of course, by Fan Arch. I'm Pete Mulroy, and let's begin today with some more talk about Jeremiah Love. It goes without saying that he's the most explosive player in the country, but what he's done on the field for Notre Dame across the past 5 games has been truly remarkable. This is where he started to really separate himself from that proverbial pack, if you will, starting with ND's October 18th victory against USC in South Bend in just that slogfest. Love ran the ball 27 times, again in that sloppy weather, totaled 228 on the ground with a touchdown. That effort helped the Irish earn a 10-point win, the type of victory that can springboard a team down the home stretch, which the Golden Blues win in that game undeniably did. We've seen a different gear. You get up for a game like that, a rivalry game, a top 25 game, CFP implications for both teams at home for Notre Dame, under the lights, lousy weather, run game favors you. Healthier team going into that one, by the way, for Notre Dame, and you come out of there with a 10-point victory. Jeremiah Love, perhaps the biggest reason for that W, because you remember CJ Carr didn't exactly have a great night. 2 weeks later, on a day where the Irish look flat, when they go up to Chestnut Hill, Love torched Boston College for $136 and 2 more scores. He'd go on from there to pick up another 94 and 2 more against Navy on November 18th. You remember that unbelievable run where he rolled across a Navy defender's body, never touched the ground with his elbow, wrist, or knees, turned it over, ran it back to the house for another touchdown, basically ended that game against the Naval Academy. So you got the 94 and the 2 against Navy. Fast forward, a $147 against Pitt, adding another touchdown in the 37-15 road triumph. And of course, what he did this past Saturday, Notre Dame's 70-7 massacre of Syracuse. The 20-year-old looked outstanding. A $171, and here's the great thing about it. He ran for 171 yards and carried the ball 8 times. And scored, by the way, 3 touchdowns. During this 5-game stretch, Love has rushed for 776 yards on 85 carries and 9 touchdowns. For the season, he's accumulated over 1,300 rush yards, 185 totes, and 17 touchdowns. He's also added 26 catches for 274 yards and an additional 3 scores. And sure, I suppose I should preface this next point by first saying that I know Saturday's victory was against a struggling Syracuse team that has been forced to deal with significant injuries. But that does not in any way mean that Jeremiah Love did not have his Heisman moment. In a season full of GOAT moments, Saturday's effort may have been the best. It may be unmatched. Maybe the USC game, given the opponent, given the total yard number he put up, and given that he put that offense on his back. You could make that argument, and I'd probably agree with you. It's Syracuse for me, could be USC as his biggest game. Folks, this is a young man who carried the ball again only 8 times on senior day. But of those 8 touches, almost half, 3 of them found their way into the end zone. The 8 carries packed an average of 21.4 yards per rush, which is just an absurd statistic. In 11 games this season, in addition to those unreal stats I just threw at you, Love carries an average of 7.1 yards per rush, and he's eclipsed the 100-yard mark in 6 of the 11 games. To no surprise, Notre Dame 6-0 in said games. It, again, goes without saying, for those college football fans outside of just Notre Dame, that the likes of quarterbacks Marcel Reed, Ty Simpson, Julian Sayin, Indiana's Fernando Mendoza are all phenomenal players having remarkable seasons. That's true. These kids are unbelievable. If you watch them, you know what I'm talking about. You could argue, and they're in the mix, depending on who you listen to, they're all Heisman-worthy seasons in their own right, and I can get on board with that. But this year, given the start ND had in opening a tough 0-2, and now on the precipice of the college football playoff thanks to reeling off 9 straight since, the biggest reason for that ascension has been the play of Jeremiah Love. Yes, the growth of the defense coming together, the continued ascension of CJ Carr, good offensive line play, but it's Jeremiah Love. He is, simply put, the best player in America. It's a no-brainer to have him in New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation. It's also a no-brainer that Love should be the first Irish player since Tim Brown in 1987 to hoist the trophy. I think we've seen that the past couple of weeks, and I think you can start saying it with a little bit more confidence now. The leader in the clubhouse for the Heisman Trophy should be running back Jeremiah Love, University of Notre Dame. And speaking of the University of Notre Dame, Saturday, November 29th, the regular season finale against Stanford, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time start on ESPN. Obviously, as I said yesterday, I'll break down some of the areas we should be focusing in on in this one, including how that Irish defense is going to approach a Stanford offense that ranks near the bottom of the FBS. And those are things and areas I'll get into as the week progresses. This year's battle for the Legends Trophy is going to be the 39th meeting all time between the two schools, and they've met on the gridiron every year since 1997, which is special. The Irish hold the edge overall, 23-14. Gold and Blue have won the past two against the Cardinal and 5 out of the last 6. With Stanford, ironically enough, their lone win in that stretch came in 2022 when they beat the Irish in South Bend 16-14. That, of course, was Marcus Freeman's first year as full-time Notre Dame head coach. Saturday, the Irish get a Stanford team coming off a rivalry win over Cal in the big game this past weekend. So emotions are going to be high on both sides, probably running a bit higher for Stanford coming off that emotional victory. Matter of fact, it cost Cal's head coach his job. So Stanford, a little bit more spunk heading into the final game of the season. And it's a Cardinal group that has struggled basically from the start under interim head coach Frank Reich. So they'll have to, Andrew Luck, their GM, they're going to have some decisions to make moving forward next year. The path and the route they go to bring on a full-time program building head coach. And I guess what you say this year with the interim tag on it, of course, Luck and Reich know each other well enough from their time with the Indianapolis Colts. What sort of path they start to travel moving forward. But, all things considered, I think Reich has done a pretty good job in attempting to keep things afloat here for Stanford. It's been tough sledding for the Cardinal, as we know, in recent years. This is a rivalry with Notre Dame that they've had some bangers in years past. You go back to 2012, in 2012, 2013, 14, 15, there are good games in there. A couple of years ago, obviously, Stanford coming and picking off Notre Dame. That was the same season Notre Dame opened the season losing on the road to Ohio State and then home to Marshall. So that was a tough loss there, but they've had some good ones over the years. Again, Notre Dame, a monster favorite in this one, but it is always special when the two programs get together. It's got a little different feeling to it, but it doesn't mean it's not significant. CFP implications galore with this game. The Irish know what they need to do, and it starts with picking up a W. And outside of that Stanford contest, Irish players, coaches, and fans alike are going to have their eyes on a handful of other games this weekend because many of them have a direct impact one way or the other on the CFP. As we know, Notre Dame entered the week ranked 9th in the CFP top 25, and if the tournament started today, the Gold and Blue would travel to Oklahoma for a first-round 8v9 matchup. Of course, again, and I'll keep saying it throughout the week, the first priority for Notre Dame this weekend is beating Stanford. That's obvious. And while there are many games that the Domers should be keeping tabs on, there's a couple specifically to me that stand out. Notre Dame, first and foremost, from a rooting perspective, is undeniably going to be rooting for Pitt to take down Miami. Why? I mean, it's not going to be easy. But in the spirit of ACC football, we've seen in a weaker conference, crazier things have happened than Pitt going in there and beating Miami. Pitt's coming off that impressive victory over Georgia Tech last weekend. That was on the heels of getting blown out by Notre Dame at home. And a Pitt win over Miami would hand the Canes a third loss. Coupled with a Notre Dame win over Stanford, that would remove talks of any proverbial comparisons between the Canes and Irish, especially since Miami, as we know, owns that head-to-head from week one where they beat Notre Dame 27-24. Now, teams change, teams evolve, teams get better. Some teams take steps back. Miami's got 2 losses to unranked teams, but they're not bad teams, SMU and Louisville. So I think we sort of overvalue sometimes the quality of a win based on whether or not that opponent has a number next to its name. It's not the case here. Those 2 losses from Miami, while certainly not Miami and Texas A&M for Notre Dame, aren't exactly bad losses, and they were close games. But if a comparison were to be made, and you go down to that head-to-head, Miami does have it. But if you look at the latest version of a resume, I think Notre Dame's got the edge there. Pitt can really help out. Give Miami that third loss. Notre Dame beats Stanford. We're not worrying about Miami anymore. Additionally, unlikely but crazier things again have happened, especially this time of the year in college football. Auburn upsetting Alabama is going to go a long way in helping Marcus Freeman's bunch. Again, it's unlikely, but we've seen instances this season where Alabama has looked out of sorts, including against Oklahoma. They have a good amount of quality wins, it's undeniable, but a third loss on the season to a bad Auburn team that's trying to redefine himself. Deuce Knight's probably going to get the start under center. Looked pretty good last week. You go down in the Iron Bowl, you're gone. You're eliminated from the discussion. You're out of the tournament, 3 losses. Georgia cementing its place in the field with a win over Georgia Tech on Friday would not hurt either. But for me, an additional good amount of help would come from one or both of BYU, home against UCF, and or Utah on the road at Kansas taking L's, all right? They're not as good as Notre Dame, but they're close enough in the rankings where you have to pay attention. They take losses, even with 2. If they both end the season with 2 losses, goodbye. You're not leapfrogging Notre Dame. Lastly, look, Ohio State knocking off Michigan is just going to completely remove any conversation for the maize and blue getting into the tournament, moving up those rankings. It would be a massive win for Michigan. It would catapult them. And then you have to start thinking a little more about this. We know Ryan Day's track record against Michigan is not exactly great. And again, this is one of those scenarios where it's probably unlikely the way Ohio State's been playing. Michigan didn't look overly great in a couple of contests this year, including a win a few days ago over Northwestern. But it's a rivalry game with emotions running high. Ohio State just taking care of business. They're in regardless. Okay, just eliminating Michigan would be a help for Notre Dame as well. But again, without a win over Stanford for Notre Dame, none of this is going to matter. As we said last week, Notre Dame taking care of its own business, regardless of what happens around them, will give the Irish a damn good chance to make a return trip to the 12-team college football playoff. And I think we can all get on board with that. You finish this season 10-2, which would mean you've ended the year on a 10-game win streak. Very similar to what happened last season. Now, I think Notre Dame's a better team than they were a year ago, and we know how that turned out. Nearly came back and won the national championship game against a really, really good Ohio State team, and Ohio State has continued that parlayed it into being the number 1 ranked team in the CFP right now. You take care of business on Saturday. I think you feel pretty good if you're Notre Dame, even without a conference championship while you're watching those from home. I think you feel pretty good about the prospect of playing for a second straight year in the 12-team CFP. But again, as I said last week when we were talking about the Week 13 matchups, it would not hurt to get a bit of help. And I just want to wrap today with some more good news. Again, we're getting into the seasons of awards. Open with talking about how Jay Love should be the Heisman favorite. And you probably saw this last week. Sophomore cornerback Leonard Moore was officially named a finalist for the 2025 Bronco Nagurski Trophy. That, of course, is given to college football's top defensive player. What more can you say about Leonard Moore? And this comes at perfect timing for the purposes of this show because he had a pick 6 in that unbelievable 35-point first quarter for Notre Dame this past weekend against Syracuse. When he's healthy, when he's right, when he's on the field, he is the best pure cover corner in the sport. It's undeniable. 5th finalist in Notre Dame history for the award, Xavier Watts, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Manti Te'o, of course, Shane Walton, who's one of my all-time favorite players for Notre Dame, played for Ty Willingham back in that really good 2002 season. Walton burst onto the scene, and he was a finalist for the award. 2 previous winners for Notre Dame of that trophy, of course, Manti Te'o and the great Xavier Watts. So you've seen the great things Leonard Moore has done in just not even 2 full seasons with the Irish, and this is his sophomore campaign. I mean, what more can you say about the kid? It's like talking ad nauseum about Jeremiah Love. That's how deep and talented this Notre Dame team is. Jeremiah Love should be the favorite for the Heisman Trophy at this point, and Leonard Moore, undeniably one of the best defensive players in the country, certainly the country's best corner. With that, we'll get a little more into the Notre Dame-Stanford game tomorrow. With that being said, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, go Irish.